Hello everyone, and welcome back to another Mirror Dungeon solo video. Today we'll be heading in using Yurodivy Ryoshu. She's actually a pretty good tremor identity and a very solid choice when building a tremor team. Her main purpose is to stack up tremor count on an enemy, and unlike certain other boatworks identities, she's actually good at it. Both her skill 1 and 2 are capable of inflicting a minimum of 2 tremor count from the start, so she doesn't have to waste 3 turns in order to just set it up. Her skill 3 is also capable of tremor bursting, something that is absolutely the bare minimum for any tremor identity to be considered even somewhat decent. Apart from being good at applying tremor count, she's pretty average in every other regard. The only other thing to note is that her passive is quite unique. Whenever another ally staggers an enemy, she will follow up with an additional skill 1 and trigger a tremor burst. This lets her do a little bit of extra damage for free, but the main purpose is for the tremor burst to hopefully do enough to force the enemy into a stagger plus. Of course, by nature of requiring a different character to stagger an enemy in the first place, it's completely useless when she's by herself. Starting the run off, we take Reverberation and Sour Liquor Aroma and pick the Forgotten for the first floor. For this boss, we're up against G-Corp, and they are incredibly dangerous. One of Ryoshu's starting weaknesses is gluttony damage, and pretty much all of them do exclusively that damage type. You do actually start with enough ego resources to be able to fuel both of Ryoshu's Teth egos once, but unfortunately the one I chose to use for this run is Red Eyes, which does not change her gluttony weakness. Getting staggered in this fight is inevitable, and once we recover, we spend the rest of the fight barely clinging onto life. We got incredibly lucky with this fight. There was more than once where if an enemy rolled 1 extra heads, we'd instantly lose on the spot. At one point, I was even forced to corrode Red Eyes just so I was able to clash with one of the enemy's back skills to be able to survive. This is actually a pretty good example of one of Ryoshu's major flaws. She does not have the greatest damage. With no modifiers whatsoever and pretty average rolling skills, she's really reliant on staggering enemies to actually do decent damage. It's not the worst thing in the world since she is a tremor identity, but with her only source of potency beyond her skill 3, she can struggle to actually stagger enemies, especially if they resist her damage types. We take Melted Eyeball for our reward and receive Grey Coat as a bonus before heading to Hell's Chicken for the next floor. Here we buy Blue Zippo Lighter, painkillers, and an extra skill 3, while also finding Nixie Divergence before making it to Papa Bongi. Yet again, we're against another boss that deals damage we're fatal to, this time Blunt. Fortunately for us, now that we have ego gifts, we have an opportunity. By using 4th Match Flame, we can resist wrath damage and reduce the amount we take from the Papa. Of course, it's nowhere near enough to avoid getting staggered, but it is enough to stop us from dying. There's not much to say about the rest of the fight. As soon as we recover from stagger, we can clash with everything, and now that we no longer take any damage at all, we can easily win the fight no problem.
부위 하나가 파괴되었어. 이대로 똑같이만 한다면 모든 부위를 파괴시킬 수 있겠지?
We take homeward for a reward and receive mirrored tactile synthesia as a bonus before heading to piercers and penetrators for the next floor. Almost immediately we're accosted by the worst fight in the entire run against the Pequod crew. Thank God there was only 4 of them, because if there was even a single one more, I think this fight might have actually been a genuine reset. There are a few major problems when it comes to this fight in particular. The first being they just do an absolutely absurd amount of damage. Even though we're ineffective to pierce damage, it's not enough. You need to be immune to pierce damage for them to not just instantly stagger you, I swear. The second problem is that we don't have enough damage either. You need nearly 100 damage on each of them to stagger them, and Ryoshu is simply not capable of doing that before they stagger and kill her instead. Third, and most importantly, none of our egos are actually that useful. Both 4th Match Flame and Red Eyes make us fatal to one of their damage types, being Sloth and Pride, and Contempt Awe has a much different problem. Contempt UC has pretty much perfect resistances for this fight, being ineffective to both Wrath and Sloth. But the problem it has is that it is not an AoE attack, or I should say it is not an AoE attack at base. One of the biggest benefits we have in this fight is the Ego Gift Greycoat, letting us heal a very substantial amount when we use an AoE attack. Greycoat provides healing whenever you use a skill with attack weight, but the thing about it is that it doesn't actually care about how much attack weight a skill has. It only cares about how much it has at base. Any skill that starts with a single attack weight and gains more through the use of resonance or some other mechanic will never work with Greycoat as long as their base attack weight is 1. This means that while Contempt Awe is capable of changing our resistances, it will never actually heal us. It does have one other trick to it though, although it doesn't really work that well. If you corrode Contempt, it will give you 7 protection on the next turn. Pretty useful, but it also nerfs your damage pretty heavily. You can't take damage, but you also can't deal damage, so ultimately net neutral, I guess. Pretty much the only way I was actually able to get out of this fight was to force corrosion. Without being able to do any meaningful damage outside of egos, and the sheer amount of damage we take in return, it was pretty much the only viable option. The struggle, however, is not yet over as we make it to the boss against the alleyway Watchdog. This guy has some of the same problems as the Pequod, but ultimately his biggest issue boils down to our clash power. Ryoshu's clash power is pretty terrible if the enemy doesn't have a sizable tremor stack. With the dog having so many parts, it's a little difficult to be able to reach the requirement for the coin power on every part. We have to use a couple of egos in order to overcome our poor clashing, but otherwise he's not that bad. We take illusory hunt for our reward and head into Rising Power Supply for the next floor. Here we buy Lithograph, Bill of Truth, and Downpour before making it to the boss against the Shock Centipede. He's really not that hard. The scariest thing about him is that he does a little bit of gluttony damage at the start that could potentially stagger us, but a single ego of any kind is enough to put a stop to that. His main gimmick of needing a bunch of clash power is not that threatening as well, since Ryoshu's clash power is more than enough when the enemy has tremor. The fight just takes a little while as, like I said, we don't have the best damage, though Bell of Truth does help alleviate that slightly.
늦으면 내 먼저 갈 거야. 완벽한 한방 시원한걸 가건 제가 조금 유리한 환경에서 가건 방금 공격 다른 데이터에게도 다시 해볼줄래? 생각이 있다고 하면 먹었어. 다른 직원에게도 도움이 될지도 몰라. 오늘도 즐거웠어. 가건 방금 공격은 좋았어. 이대로만 계속해보면 좋을 텐데. 좋아. V 하나를 박살냈어. 결선 V에 따른 가건 먼저 끝내고 돌아. 가건
We take employee card for our reward and head into excessive gluttony for the final floor. Here we buy oscillating bracelet and eclipse of scarlet moths while also fusing clockwork spring before heading in to face the final boss against the Fey Lantern. Out of every single abnormality in this game, this one still scares me the most.
가건
Every time I see it, I just get flashbacks to Mirror Dungeon 3.
기다리는 거 못해.
It's fixed now though, and isn't as completely broken for solos as it was back then, but I'll still never forget it. Ultimately though, it's not that difficult for us. We have enough damage to reveal his body, and Downpour ensures we always have enough clash power. Even though we get staggered at some point, it doesn't really matter. As long as you have enough damage to avoid getting captivated, you can always win this fight.
그러니까 거기서 이렇게 피했으면 됐잖아. 가건 쨍그랑 V가 조각났어. 계속해도 돼. 결손 분리에 따른 관리법.
파던. 가진 놈들을 털.
저거 봐, 쟤 휘청거리고 있다.
파도한다.
완벽한 한방. 시원한걸? 좋아, V 하나를 박살냈어.
파도한다.
뭐야? 대체 V가 파괴됐어.
파도한다.
승객이 딱콩 한 방 먹였어. 방금 공격. 다음에 다른 쇼트에게 다시 해볼래? 영상을 만들면 칼날이 잘 되네요. 직원에게도 도움이 될지 아마 그 공격이 약점이었겠죠?
그 기분을 보리도록 하지. 완벽. 생각해보니 고철덩이 발명품으로 고장난 윗대가리를 부수는 것까지도 꽤 미약적.
And that's how I soloed Mirror Dungeon 4 hard using only Yurodivy Ryoshu. She's very good at supporting Tremor. No Tremor stack ever died so long as she landed her attacks, but she doesn't really do much else. I mean, you don't really need her to do much else, so it's not really a negative thing, to be honest. Also, I forgot to mention this, but she was underleveled for this entire run. I only had her at level 40 because I forgot to level her up. Oh well, I made the run harder for myself for no reason. Anyway, that's it from me. Like and subscribe to not miss next time where we'll be using this character. Goodbye.